We were laughing. Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Melissa Olson. I'm the director here. This is our first Friends program in 2.5, 3.5. I'm not sure. A long time because of our friend COVID. And I just want to thank everybody for coming, especially our 3 speakers. I'm going to have Jenny King, who put this program together, introduce the speakers. Jenny is on our Friends organization, our group. And anyway, Jenny, please, take it away.
Hi everyone. I'm new on the Friends, so this is like my first sort of official thing that I've helped put together. And we were having a meeting in September, and the purpose of the meeting was to try to figure out what we could do to bring back the monthly talks that used to happen years ago and haven't happened since COVID. And someone who's in this room said, well, Halloween would be a fun time to do ghost stories. And we all had to volunteer, so I jumped right on that because I love ghost stories. And hopefully they're all friendly ghosts. I used to watch Casper when I'm dating myself. So anyway, to tell the stories, we have Jim Mitchell, who's going to talk about the ghost that inhabits the lighthouse. And John Oldham's going to talk about the ghost that runs around the school. And Earl Mackenzie is going to talk about the strange goings-on in the house across the street that he owned for many years, and Christine now lives in. So get ready to hear some spooky stuff, I guess. And Jim's going to speak first about the lighthouse, so he's got some handouts and pictures.
Yeah, keep your. I hope I have enough, but I know I have more than here. I have a brand new printer, and I started printing these things out this morning that just kept running. I had to pull a little plug finally.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
We'll take questions.
I bet she was. She was nasty.
The reason I have given you these pictures and everything is that I can kind of talk from them. And I'm going to talk about the first picture up on the right. Most people don't realize there were 2 lighthouses here on Islesboro. And the first lighthouse was a wooden one, and it was built in 1815. And it was then torn down before 1870. And it occupied the space between the tower and the keeper's house. And that's called the Elm now. And it was, and it's the only thing that we saved, well, they saved, I should say. I wasn't around, but they built the second one, of the original lighthouse. And that's where the water cisterns were to catch the rainwater, because this was all built on solid rock. There was no way to drill a well or to dig a well or anything else like that. And so they kept that, and they also used the upper floor for storage. And we think that the ghosts inhabited that area in the cisterns, which are pretty creepy looking if you were to go in them and all. Although many of the ghosts have been seen in the tower primarily and not in the keeper's house. And a number of these keepers that have sat there and everything have found things happening in the mornings when they would come back in to open up. One of them, Gene Barrell, found that there were a number of objects moved around the lighthouse and put in the front of the door to the cistern. So that's one reason why we kind of think the ghosts are there. And it's very important to remember now that the current lighthouse is the second one. What are those come in and tell us that we have a ghost. And each one seemed to have a difference. Some of them told us that we had a woman, and others told us that we had a bearded man. So when I first got involved with the lighthouse back in 2000, when we became year-round people, and I got involved with the lighthouse, it always kind of amazed me or interested me, why do people see different types of ghosts? I used to see that, you see one ghost and you've seen them all. So over the years, the speculation was that the male ghost was Francis Brindle, and the female ghost was the woman in the picture down below, and her name is Eliza Pendleton Brindle. Her first husband died, and she married a Brindle. And that speculation had no reason whatsoever. Then she looked so grim in her picture. Unfortunately, most of the portraits we have there look grim. At the time when these pictures were taken, the exposure time was several seconds. And to keep them steady, they used to put a clamp behind their head on a stand so they could hold it. And they would tell them not to smile, because smile is the hardest thing to hold for, whatever time at length. So most of the portraits all look grim, and so unfortunately, we're not sure whether she is or not. And I've kept looking for some other reason why we had to, usually a ghost is associated with something tragic that happened in the lighthouse. And we didn't have any of those. We couldn't figure it out. And all of a sudden, I found out in some publication that one of our lighthouse keepers was killed in a dynamite blast at Brindle Point, and was always kind of interested into which one it was. So I started to look into it. We have a portrait of him. That's him right there. His name is James Hall. He was a lighthouse keeper on a very spooky island, and that's what the island is down below on the right. That's Latinicus Rock. And there are two towers there and the keeper's home. The keeper's home has been swept away, and one of the towers in books and everything has been closed because of paranormal activity. And so it's now automated and everything, but James Hall started out there as like the third lighthouse keeper, grade lighthouse keeper. And he worked his way up all the way to senior, and then he got moved to Islesboro. Now, a number of the keepers starting in the late 1800s and through the early 1900s were keepers that had been out on islands in the godforsaken places, and they were getting old, and Islesboro is an easy lighthouse to take care of. A number of them had cows there on the field outside, and they grew vegetables, and they were still responsible for doing all the repairs, all the painting of the lighthouse, taking care of it, carrying the fuel up, and especially when they switched the light in the tower over from sperm oil to kerosene. They moved the storage out and built the storage house. That's the one way out that you can see next to the terminal building out there and everything. And the reason they did that was that at that time, kerosene was very explosive, and they thought if they kept it in the thing, it could catch fire. And so in the wintertime, every keeper would have to walk out there and he'd get a bucket or 2 buckets, even in the snow, and come back in, and then put them there. As a matter of fact, when they used sperm oil, they had to heat it up because the sperm oil would, because of the cold, would turn into like a wax. And so they heat it up on the wood stove in the front room, and then he would then carry the liquid up. But anyhow, getting back to James Hall, and I studied this, and I found out that his wife applied for either back pay or insurance from the government once he was killed, because the first persons, they claimed that he wasn't on lighthouse property when he did it. And she went back and said yes, but he was doing lighthouse business. And evidently, I'm not sure who he got the dynamite from, but he didn't have a lot of experience. And what he was trying to do is, on the road where the third line parks, and this is my supposition, there was ledge there that was in the way that prevented the carriages and everything, because we're talking now before cars were on Islesboro. Would have a hard time getting down, and he went and evidently got this dynamite, which he probably had no experience with, and put it there and blew it up, and a chunk came over and hit him in the head and crushed his skull. So I thought, okay, now we've pinned it down. Somebody's had a violent life there. And that's what I supposed until just about a month ago, we were talking about the tower and the painting of the tower and some other things relative to the tower, and it came out that and that's why the picture of the tower here on the left, if you look at the land, it comes out and then it drops off to where the tower is. Evidently, that land, in order to build the new tower in late 60s, early 70s, was where there were 11 graves. And they had to move the graves to a new location. And according to John Mitchell, who knows everything about Islesboro, a number of the graves went to the graveyard on the golf course, and the other went to the other cemetery, Maple Grove. And interesting though, and he thought that maybe only they moved with gravestones, that there were no bodies there, basically. I haven't looked into how long people had been buried there, but it was probably at least 30 years or something like that. And I would imagine that that area being exposed as it is to flooding and other things would get very wet and help the deterioration and the dissolving of everything. So there probably wasn't anything to move except the monument along. And thinking about that, it came back to me, that explains why we've seen female ghosts and male ghosts. And I haven't quite put together the list of all of them, but we probably have almost like a poltergeist episode going on, if you've ever seen that movie. And so we have not just one ghost, we've got a number of ghosts, and we've got to try to figure out which is which. I've never experienced a ghost. My wife Charlotte, for years when she was sitting in the lighthouse, wanted to see the ghost, and she would go to the stairs that go down into the tunnel that connect the keeper's house to the tower, and swear at the ghost in Arabic. Now, why she thought the ghost would know Arabic, I'm not sure, but evidently the swear words that she had learned growing up in Beirut from the Beirut taxi cab drivers were especially bad. And the chief, like, swearing at them and that would get them out. But they never came out. The only experience I personally had was I was there sitting for the people, and a woman came in early in the morning, and we have a little pamphlet on the ghost, and she read that. She went up into the tower. She was the only one there, and she came back down and she says, "I think I've experienced your ghost." I said, "Well, I was very polite and said, I weren't. What happened?" And she said, as she was climbing into the tower and going up into the lantern, that's the light area, she heard a man's voice up there, and when she got up there, there was no one there. I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. And this one was from Chicago. And then another day tripper came out that afternoon, another woman, and she was from Sweden. Couldn't have had any contact with the first person. She went up and she came down with the exact same story, that she heard a voice, and it was a man's voice. When she got there, there was no one there. I suspect that on Islesboro we have a lot of ghosts, because I've been doing some research in some of the cemeteries and looking at the ones with tombstones of those that have died at sea or died from drowning or the yellow fever or whatever. And I'm sure the Maple Grove has just as many as does Bayview and as does Pendleton Point, Pendleton Cemetery. But it's very interesting. It's interesting to me to dig into the history of some of these people and everything. And one of the most interesting facts that I found is that we all think that the captains of the boat had a fondness for their ship. And I'm finding out that they didn't. It was like a car. Once you got rid of the car, you didn't think about the old car. And that was the way they were on the ships and everything. So I'm sure we've got a lot of ghosts in the cemeteries. Nobody, to my knowledge, has stayed there overnight. I've been thinking of running a seance in the lighthouse at Halloween, or certainly a Ouija board at Halloween, and see what happens. But we have the ghost. Thank you.
And Earl and next, because he's going to leave a little early, so we'll save questions for the end.
Well, I'm going to combine the ghost story with a little bit of history in the island. Now, many of you probably know that there was a murder took place, supposedly the only murder on the island that's written up in the Islesboro history by Captain Joseph Farrell in 1856. Well, that's not entirely true, and I'll get to that in a minute, but this relates to what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to read just a little bit of this. It's a little bit gruesome, but it's part of our history. Very interesting reading. There's several volumes for those who haven't read this. So this is the murder of Anne Brown by her husband, Captain Joseph Brown. Now, an interesting side note is this library wasn't there then. And where this supposedly took place, there was a house not far from here, out back this way. The road wasn't there at that time. It was different. So very close to where we are now is where this took place. So, as has been said elsewhere in this history, but one native of Islesboro has ever been committed to the state prison, that man being Captain Joseph J. Brown, who was tried and convicted of murder in the first degree and sentenced to be hanged. Brown killed his wife, Anne Brown, at their house in Islesboro on April 16, 1836. The murder was a cold-blooded and unprovoked one. And he was about 35 years of age. His wife was about 30. They say she was an entirely inoffensive woman. But Brown, when intoxicated, is said to have treated his wife brutally, beating her in such occasions without ever alleging any provocation. Now they had 6 children, 4 of which died at a very early age, so there were 2 remaining children. Amelia, who was 6 when it happened, and Martha, who was 1. The day before the murder, Brown had been to Belfast, and as usual when there, he'd indulged freely in intoxicating liquor. He didn't return home until the morning of the murder, arriving just after breakfast. His family consisted of his wife, 1 daughter, 12, and an infant of 4 months, I guess. 4 other children had been born, but they died young. Now, they were the only, Anne and the 2 kids were the only people in the house. Her sister had stayed there the night before, but had gone home. Her name was Mrs. Fletcher. So Brown came home, gave his wallet to his daughter for whatever reason, picked up a butcher knife from the floor, and without any explanation, just slit his wife's throat from ear to ear, right in front of the kids. So he left and went to the neighbors, the Fletchers, and said to Tom Fletcher, "There's been some trouble at my house, and you better go over," basically. Went over, she was dead, immediately sounded the alarm. At this point, Joseph took off and ran, as near as I can put together, towards Hughes Point. So there was a chase by some of the local fellas, and he jumped in a rowboat and started rowing towards Castine. Then he came back to the shore quickly, grabbed a big rock, which back in those days you'd use a rock for an anchor, tied a line around it, conveniently putting his knife in there too, and then he tied the other end around his neck and went rowing out, and with some of these other guys in hot pursuit, he jumped over. I guess he must have thought better of it on the way down, cut the rope, came up, they captured him, took him to Belfast, where he stood trial. This is kind of interesting. Let's see. Yeah, next day after murder, an inquest was held in Belfast. A lot of Boardmans here, by the way. And the prosecuting attorney was the Honorable George Evans. So, I thought that was kind of interesting. Before I forget to mention, I did lighthouse duty in Lieutenant's trial when I was in the Coast Guard.
Did you?
Yeah. And it is spooky. I used to stay up in the late at night sometimes.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
Anyway. So he first pleaded innocent, then later changed it to guilty. It was pretty, there were witnesses, everything else. God spoke against him. So he was sentenced to be hanged. So he was sent to Thomaston, where he awaited his hanging, and it was a bit of time, but he ended up breaking a mirror and taking a shard of the mirror and slitting his throat from ear to ear and killed himself before he could be hung. So that's what is always thought to be the only murder that took place in Islesboro, according to the historian for the sheriff. But that's not the end of the story. It turns out there was a second murder. And for whatever reason, he opted not to put it in. And they finally, too, they felt that Joseph Brown was insane by different things, because he said he couldn't remember doing any of this. So they think he was insane, or would have periods of insanity. So, in 2004, Randy Purinton wrote an article about this Sutherland edition research in the archives of Belfast and around. In 1862, Joseph Brown, who was the brother sorry, I'm saying this wrong. Joseph Brown's brother was married to Esther Brown, who was Captain William Morgan's daughter. They had 6 children. She went through periods of insanity, and she'd been committed in Augusta to the insane asylum up there for several years. At some point during their marriage, back when they had kids, but now she was back on the island. At some point, there was just she and her 4-year-old daughter at the house, Lucinda. For some reason, and it never became clear why, she picked up an axe and killed her daughter, 4-year-old daughter, brutally. So she was found to be criminally insane and committed to the insane asylum for the rest of her life. Now, it's not mentioned anywhere in the Islesboro history. Maybe the reason being, back then, people maybe took pity on her because she was insane. She had bouts of issues all through her life. Maybe it was so brutal that they didn't want to put it in history. Who knows? The fellow who wrote this lived here during that time period. And so whatever reason, it's glossed over. So there's actually been 2 murders, primarily probably by people that were insane. So this leads me to the ghost story. So first off, I'll touch on the second part, the second one. So over the years, there's been different people talk about seeing a child on a swing set on the island with ribbons in her hair, a little girl. I don't know any details about where that's been seen or by whom, but that's part of the lore out here. And, one theory has it that people that die tragic, violent deaths are more apt to come back as ghosts, spirits, or whatever. Who knows? I'm a pragmatist. I think maybe 200 years from now we'll understand where all this stuff's coming from. Maybe there's energy given out. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe it's another dimension. All I know is what I've experienced in my life, and I tend to be a skeptic, but I have experienced things. So that gets me to the, I don't want to stop too long here, to the house across the way. So, which now belongs to Christine back there. So I sold the house in 1977 to Christine, and then actually rented it from her a little later again after Bonnie and I were married. But I lived there as a bachelor and whatever for a number of years with my big Newfoundland dog and a horse named Noki. And it's the house directly across the road here. So when I first came out here, I was still in the Coast Guard Reserve, and I know my first thing I ever heard, I had come over here and I rented a room in the house from the owner, a fellow named Frank Nazier. And I really liked the house. I needed a place to stay for the winter. I'd been living on a boat I had, a sailboat, a small sailboat. I've lived on boats a lot in my life. And it was getting pretty cold, so I figured I'd better get ashore somewhere. And I was working on a 700-acre island. So, long story short, I ended up being able to buy the house from Frank. Beautiful sea captain's house. Has 2 fireplaces. It was built in 1890, before anything here happened, and with a new road in front here. Back that time, it had an ocean view. It was all fields. It wasn't as grown up as it now is. So, let's see, to keep my story straight here, how this all started to happen. So anyway, my first experience after I bought the house was, actually it was almost the first night I stayed in the house after I bought the house. And it's kind of, I don't usually talk about this first, I didn't talk about this for many years, but if you look at the house, you'll see there's a dormer in the front parlor. And the front parlor of that house is an elegant room. It has big pocket doors that fold into the walls, where the big staircase goes upstairs, got 9-foot ceilings. There's a tile fireplace in there. There's another fireplace in the dining room. It's quite an elegant old house. It's a sea captain's house. Captain Joseph Dodge had it built. And I didn't have furniture at that point. I spent everything I had just getting the house. I was figuring out how I was going to get some furniture, build it or something. And I was sleeping on a mattress in the front room. And I woke up, and it was one of those nights in October with almost a full moon coming through the windows there. The moon's rising. And it felt very cold. And I looked up, and it's like foggy in the room. It's like a mist. And it just put shivers up my back. It made me very uncomfortable. And I'm a character that doesn't get bothered by too much. So I got up, and my sleeping apparel wasn't much, absolutely nothing. So I got up, wrapped a blanket around me, and looked, and there's it's almost like a fog or a mist in there swirling, and I think I must be dreaming. I'm going to be dreaming. This can't be happening. But then I realized, no, I'm not dreaming, because I hit my foot on something, and it hurt. So I got uncomfortable enough that I left the house and came down the front lawn, and it was moonlight, and I'm down here close to the road, and I don't know what time it was, in the wee hours sometime. I got nothing on but my blanket, but a lot of someone come by, and I look up at the house, and that whole front room, it's misty in there. It's like a fog in there, and made me really nervous. But now I'm starting to get cold, and I also got angry. And I'm the kid that when I was a kid, I was like any kid. You're scared of the dark. And I grew up in the country, way down a country road, and there was a little cabin down the road that everyone said, "Oh, that's haunted. Never go near it." One night when I was a kid, I went there all by myself. I'm going to beat this thing. And I went all through the place in the middle of the night just to prove to myself it wasn't haunted. So I'm not usually spooked very easy. So anyway, I said, that's it. This is my house. And I went back up, went in, turned all the lights on. Didn't see anything. The mist was gone. Finally went back to sleep, I guess. Can't say very comfortably. I think I probably left the lights on. I don't know. And next day I thought, did this really happen? Could this really happen? But yeah, I think it did happen. I had a big bruise on my foot where I banged it. And so then some odd things started happening. And it would always happen at 10 minutes to 8 in the morning. I don't know what significance that time had, but my clocks kept stopping, or alarm clocks would go off. And at that time, my girlfriend was at the University of Maine, way before mine. and she was a master's student up there, and I still didn't get any furniture, so we're sleeping in the front room in the parlor, and at some point, it was a weekend morning, probably Sunday morning, and I hear a woman's voice say, "What time is it?" And it kind of groggy, wake up, and the alarm clock was on the other side of Carol, and she woke up when I started to stir, and I said, "What did you just? Why do you want to know what time it is?" And she said, "I didn't say anything." And then, what I didn't say is the woman's voice at the time was, then shortly after said it's 10 minutes to 8.
Oh, jeez.
And that's when I looked over at the clock, and Carol woke up, said she didn't say anything, it was 10 minutes to 8. That was kind of spooky. Then the clock in the kitchen would stop occasionally, 10 minutes to 8. It was, at that time it was a wind-up clock. I'd wind it, and it would, many times. Then things would happen like the basement door was when you first went into the kitchen. And one time we were going in and just banging on the door, like someone's trying to get out through the door. I opened the door up, no one's down there. At that time, that was the only way there. Now there's a bulkhead, but there was no bulkhead. Went down through the basement, all through, nothing. But probably one of the strangest things that happened was I had a friend over. This fellow that was staying there for a little bit of time, and he was staying up in the big front bedroom over the parlor, which we call the big front room was the parlor. And we were eating breakfast next morning, and he said, I had the damnedest dream last night. He said, it was so realistic. And I said, well, what was it? And he said, well, he said, I dreamed I was up in your attic, and way over in the corner, hanging from the rafter, was this little rocking chair, like a little child's rocking chair. And he described it, and I said, oh, that's bizarre. And I said, I've never even been up there. The only way to get up in the attic, unless Christine's changed it, in the middle bedroom, there was a hatch in the ceiling, big high ceilings, you had to get a ladder to go up, and you had to walk way across, and there had been a fire. Well, I had looked up in, and the beams up there were charred where there had been a fire that had gotten put out, fortunately. Chimney fire that had spread at some point in the house's history from the dining room fireplace. And I didn't climb the big front part, which is huge upstairs there. So I kept thinking about that all day at work, and just kept thinking and thinking and thinking about it. Finally, I got a ladder upstairs and climbed up. I should at least check this upstairs out. And I don't, maybe I could put another room up there. There's a lot of room. And so I went up there, and I got a flashlight. There's no windows up there. It's dark as hell. And walking across the beams, and shining light. All of a sudden, I shine a light over the rafters, and guess what? This little rubber rocking chair is hanging on the rafters, way up towards the front, over the parlor. And of course, put a shiver on my back. I got the rocking chair, brought it down, and for many years it was actually upstairs in the garage out there, or now it's gone with the old barn. And I could never explain that. And and what I didn't mention, I was still in the Coast Guard, and I used to go back and forth in uniform to duty sometimes when I had duty. And I was on the ferry one day, and there were a couple older ladies. This was in the old ferry, the center, where you sit there and you play cribbage and you chat and one thing and another. And I didn't know a lot of these people. And so I'm still not sure who they were. One of them may have been Maddie Dodge, I'm not sure. I got to know Maddie years later well, because she was a friend of my mother, who was the librarian here. But at that time, I didn't know Maddie, but I overheard them talking about the house. But, this some young guy, and it's funny because they thought I might be a hippie, they said. Here I am in uniform, short hair. And who I was. I wondered if I'd seen a ghost yet, or if I'd experienced anything. Because I guess there'd been a history of different people over many years having experiences in that house. Other people would be there for years, nothing. So several years after I owned the house, my folks moved out. Ended up buying a house down here, but they lived with me for a little while. And my mother never sensed anything. Carol, the girl I talked about earlier, did. She was terrified a few different times, and she never could explain why. Just would have to leave. But then the culminating experience for me, which was a nice day, sort of like today, a nice sunny day, just like this. Behind the parlor, there's another room out on the back of the house, and I had that set up like a little study. I always had a lot of books around, different things, and I was in the house by myself, and my dog was there, I guess, my Newfoundland, a 186-pound Newfoundland. He was infamous around here in those days. And I'm walking in there, and I'm kind of looking down as I'm walking, and there's parquet floor and a little connecting room that went to that room. It's just as I walk into the room, this bright sunny day, it's the afternoon, I guess the sun was coming through that window in the back. I almost walk into somebody, and I look up really quick, and say, oh, excuse me, like you would. And also I'm looking at a woman in kind of, it looked almost like an old-fashioned nightdress. She had, I can still sort of picture the face, bluish eyes, but the face, I remember that her hair was in a bun. And just as I'm looking at her, we looked at each other, and then she faded. Said she's gone.
Yeah.
So I heard this meeting pretty quick this morning, and I'm looking around, and, I just went to sit down for a while. And now, before this happened, I got in the habit of talking to my house. I come in because all the weird stuff, I just, it's my house, I'm not gonna get scared of it, something's here, I'm gonna deal with it. My grandmother always talked about things, her family went back to the 1820s in Salem and Beverly, Massachusetts, where old New England, way back. And she talked about things she had experienced in her lifetime. But that one experience really set me in my haunches. I just wasn't sure I could take it. So I'd always felt there was a feminine presence. Well, that kind of solidified it in my mind. So I just was always, I'd come in, I say hi, I leave, I just make some comment, and it just became a part of it. Sometimes things would happen every month, sometimes things wouldn't happen for years. Bonnie never had anything happen. George lived there for a while with us, the Honorable George Evans, and I don't think he ever had anything happen that I know about, but different friends that I did have stay there different times would have funny things happen. My youngest son had things happen. You see a doorknob turning at night and different things. He would get spooked. My father.
But they did not know about.
They didn't. I never told them about it because I didn't want them to be uncomfortable.
Right.
So I just quietly had an understanding with the house. That Bonnie and the two boys and I were going to be there, and they're off limits. And there was never an issue. Once or twice with the clock maybe, but I never said anything. And then we ended up building up Island, moving into the new house up there, and we're living in our schooners for many years, and that was it. I still, when I drive by there, I look up at that window. I take a special.
What years were you there?
1972 to 77, and then again from 1985, 86, 87.
Okay.
Did you ever tell your friend that you went up into the attic and saw?
Do you think he went up and was just messing with you?
I don't even normally talk about this. Ginny hounded me to come.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Earl. So I guess now we'll go on to John is going to talk about the school.
Yeah, no, I may have to leave a little early because I have an engagement in Belfast. So I have to jump in a boat and get over there. Not the ferry, but another boat. So if you see me get up and leave with Bonnie, not because I'm not enjoying the story.
And we can ask questions at the end too. If anyone has a question for Earl before he has to go. But when we get all done, if people have stories of their own, it would be fun to share.
Ann Brown, that's why I related it. And her grave is up on the mountain, up way down through the woods here.
I have a question. Did you ever know what the 10 minutes to 8 had to do with anything? Did you ever find that out?
The different tenants?
The 10 minutes to 8 time.
No, but I know she was murdered in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That,
Who knows?
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, the mate to that house, as I understand it, is our neighbor, Pauline York.
It is. You're right. Same builder.
A little bit different on the ground.
Some heritage.
Can everybody hear John?
What? All right, I'm going to take a chance with you guys.
Nobody breathe.
Scariest part of that story, Earl, is when you said what you were wearing when you were sleeping. So my job is easy because I don't believe a word of this. And this was written by my sister-in-law, Bonnie Mallory Oldham. And so you can find this online. That's where I found it. I got her permission to share this. It's entitled Not Alone, The Haunting of Islesboro. One ghostly appearance goes to the head of the class. I started working at the school in 1975 as the janitor, and I had some pretty odd hours, and nothing. He's a skeptic, I'm cynical. It's the same thing. So I'm just going to read portions of this. Perhaps due to their remoteness and resultant romantic allure, islands possess an air of mystery that's always made me suspect that islanders must have scores of stories to tell of haunted houses and other paranormal phenomena. Islesboro, for instance, has no shortage of intriguing tales of ghostly presences and mysterious places where, on nightly strolls, one finds oneself walking very quickly indeed. Unexplained floating lights, spectral apparitions, tangibly unsettling atmosphere, and eerie echoes are but a few of the sights, sounds, and sensations that more than one islander has experienced over the years. Some of Islesboro's spirits associate themselves strongly with certain places, such as Stevens Field, with its headless horseman legend. For generations, young people have walked there at night with trepidation, dreading to hear the sound of horses' hooves echoing across the narrows. Filmy figures have been spotted taking an evening stroll through the Up Island Cemetery, and the bluff, supposedly the site of an ancient Indian burial ground, is said to be visited by mysterious groupings of red lights hovering over houses, visible from the water. Many islanders also report seeing floating red lights frequently in the woods. In 1926, Mrs. Atterbury built Rock Ledge, or Stone Ledge, the last major Islesboro summer cottage in the pre-Depression era. A later owner, Mrs. Lillian S. Whitmarsh, donated Stone Ledge Cottage to the town of Islesboro in 1952 to be remodeled and used as a consolidated school. On December 26th of that year, Island residents voted to accept this gift as the most wonderful Christmas gift we ever had. Almost as soon as Rock Ledge Cottage began to be used as a school, staff, students, and community members began to notice a resident Islesboro Central School ghost, reported right from the start to be Mrs. Atterbury. Former students tell of paintings that were frequently moved around, footsteps heard in the attic, and lights turned on and off when no one was around. One alumna, a high school student during the 1970s, recalls that her crowd would often return home from dinner at the Harbor hamburger shop by way of a slight detour by the school, just to scare each other. Although they never tried to enter the building, they would on occasion see dim lights moving from window to window. Since no cars were visible in the parking lot at those times, the students would get thoroughly spooked, running as fast as they could down the back slope of the school and get away. On a particularly eerie night, they swear they saw a ghostly manifestation in the school's French door window. Was it Mrs. Atterbury watching them, or just the reflection of night clouds and a full moon? Among present school personnel, opinions, experience, and sightings run the gamut from skepticism to nervous belief. One teacher says it's an interesting story that he personally, despite being there every hour of the day and night, has never seen, heard, or felt anything at all in the years he's worked at the school. So that was me. I've been accused of not paying attention in other areas too, but several other staff members, however, report actual sightings of Mrs. Atterbury in the flesh. There are many consistent features to these close encounters with Mrs. Atterbury. Almost all of them have occurred between the hours of 8:30 and 10:30 p.m. Personnel alone in the building at night frequently feel strongly that they're not alone, accompanied by that hair standing on end feeling. Footsteps can be heard in the attic and up the stairs, along with isolated pockets of extreme cold, banging, closing, and opening of doors, and lights being turned on and off by themselves in the school's hallways. The rattling of blockers is another common manifestation. Less common occurrences include a basketball mysteriously bouncing itself across the gymnasium floor and a ghostly tap on the shoulder. Most everyone who enters the building at night sheepishly admits to talking to Mrs. Atterbury. Really?
Oh, heck no.
Reassuring her that they won't be but a moment, or just coming in to do a little work. You don't mind, do you? Apparently, Mrs. Atterbury sometimes likes to do a little research herself, on several occasions having turned on computers when no one else was there. Even with these appeals to Mrs. Atterbury for tolerance, people have been known to flee the building because they were just too creeped out. But for the most part, people just close the doors and get done what they have to do as quickly as possible. Those who have seen Mrs. Atterbury describe her as being dressed in an old-fashioned manner, in a white, flowing sort of nightgown. She wears her white hair in a bun, carries a candle and sconce, and is either stout or tall and wiggly. Almost without exception, people who have actually encountered her in the flesh report having no fear, finding her presence to be a friendly one. Perhaps the brevity of their contact was a factor. Since she was gone literally in the blink of an eye, they hardly had any time to react. What could Mrs. Atterbury be doing at that particular time of night? Several theories are offered. She's patrolling the house before locking up for the evening. She's checking for an intruder before going to bed. She's looking for a wayward servant who hasn't answered her call bell, or she's searching for her lover, who's supposed to occupy a room adjacent to a bedroom. Whatever the reason, let's hope she remains the friendly, nurturing presence people have found her to be, and personally speaking, these are Bonnie's words, let's hope she doesn't take exception to anything in this article.
Question, Ms. Cher, did you experience anything? And Bonnie, you worked at that. Yes.
10 years, I think.
No, I've been so disappointed, I never saw or heard anything.
How about you?
No, I didn't experience, but when I first worked there, Vernon Shaw was there late at night. I probably was a little worse. From Vernon.
Oh, oh my.
But whatever.
Just, okay.
I have one more thing that I wanted to should have had, but recently, within the last 2 years, we've gotten a call from the great-grandson of Francis Brindle. And he told us that a woman named Teresa Rose had promised to haunt his lighthouse forever. Now, I have no idea, we have no way of knowing what Teresa Rose and Francis did, but boy, he must have really pissed her off to have her promise to haunt the lighthouse forever. So, but
I think y'all maybe you've seen on Facebook that Muppet Moran has said would love to be here because she has had many experiences with ghosts at the Russell House, at the Reed House. And she's told us about how she's heard little footprints running around and goes up and finds that there's a print of a child on a bed upstairs.
You see the crushing of the head in the pillow.
yeah.
Right. And once we were
And to hear, she's, nice to hear dishpan being moved around and fixing the climbing and stuff. And the one we actually experienced together, we were on a party on the beach, so we could look across and see. And the lights would go on and off, and
there was nobody involved in it. And then a couple years ago, Muppet wanted to, she believes in this stuff, and Barry, we do too. And she wanted to do a table tipping and get to speak with her sister Christine, as did Dawn Hutchinson. And Chris Dickman was also involved. And so Barry did a little research to find someone who could come out and do that. And we found, and as it turned out, it was a woman, it was a nurse that we worked with in Waterville, in the rehab center in Waterville, and she now does this table tipping. So She came out, Barry went to pick her up on the other side, never told her a thing about the greenhouse. And when she walked in, her name was Alice, she just walked in the kitchen and she went, whoa, there's a lot of energy in this house. And she actually, I mean, the things that she was able to, like Muffet and Christina were known for their baked beans when they would go to any of our functions. And Alice is sitting there and she goes, why am I smelling baked beans? Barry and I were in the peripheral. We didn't get involved with this. It was Chris and Muffet and Dawn and our friend Alice, who now does this table too. Dawn Etchinson had fallen off a ladder the week before. And Alice looked at him and said, she wants you to get the heck off the ladder.
Oh, wow.
I was like, whoa.
So Alice just walked into this whole thing blind?
Blind.
You didn't tell her anything?
No preference.
No preference at all. And then it was very emotional. Chris got to speak with Jerry.
Oh.
And, you know, and she said, Jerry wants you to know that it was okay that you were not there when he died.
Oh.
She said, he sent you away. Jerry had sent him to the store or something, and when he came back, found it. I mean, the whole scene was so emotional. I'm sitting in the back, because there was so much that she couldn't have possibly known, and it was happening in this greenhouse, you know. And Muffet said, this has been going on for years in this house. That she has seen and experienced.
Would she like to sign up for next year's?
Yeah, she could stay next year.
Well, I wish she could stay later in the season.
Yeah, maybe if I could, like, you know.
Yeah, but there's a lot going on at that greenhouse.
Yeah, you feel it.
Well, I plan to be buried up in the Up Island Church Cemetery, so come up and visit me after I come.
I'm just